Attention Autopia drivers. Please remain seated in your car at all times and always keep your seatbelt fastened. To make your car go, press your foot down on the pedal. To stop, take your foot off the pedal. For your own safety and the safety of other drivers, please do not bump the car ahead of you or stop your car in the middle of the track. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to The Lowdown on the Plus Up, a podcast where we look at everyone's favorite theme park attractions, lands, textures, and novelties. We talk in, over, about, and through our week's topic, and then, with literally no concern for practicality, safety, or economic viability, we come up with ways to make them better. My name is Kelly McCubbin, columnist for the theme park website Boardwalk Times, and with me, as always, is Peter Overstreet, University Professor of Animation and Film History in Northern California. So, Pete.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to be talking about a couple of things today. It's going to be, it's not a complicated show in the fact that we are going to do some mega deep dives tonight, but it is going to be complicated in the fact that we got two or three things to talk about tonight.
Yeah. It's a potpourri.
It's a potpourri show. Yeah. It's a lighthearted potpourri show, and we guarantee it'll be a lot of fun. The first thing that I wanted to mention to the audience and is tell everybody who's listening is that Kelly and I have never actually traveled together before.
That's right. Yeah.
Until a couple of weeks ago before we recorded this. And so our respective partners both kind of expressed to us, you guys have to go on a road trip and you have to go to Disneyland together. And
I don't think it was a please God get out of the house kind of thing. But maybe it was.
A little bit. I'm sure it was a little bit. You know, life gets stressful, and to be fair, our partners know that this is our happy place. And so, and they really kind of want to see what would happen if we hit the road. And also, and we will talk about another motivator shortly on why we went. But Kelly and I picked him up on a Wednesday morning, and we just drove down in my car, and we went down to Anaheim, and we went to Disneyland Park together for the first time.
We did.
It was one of the easier trips I've ever had going to the park, of just kind of going, we both know how to do this park pretty easily with our own temperaments, you know. And we soaked it in as a regular park patron would be. And we also soaked it in as the show. And we came up with idea after idea of going, we got to do this on the show. We have to do that on the show. And one of those subjects we will talk about tonight.
We had such a great time. And Pete is the perfect traveling partner for me to Disneyland, because I can and did say, hey, Pete, can we go find the wall on Main Street with oddly shaped bricks?
That was in the first 5 minutes of walking into Main Street. It wasn't like, hey, okay, the first thing we did was, Mr. Lincoln is down. Darn.
Yeah.
They're doing something new to Mr. Lincoln, which is an update. I don't know if we talked about this before.
Probably not.
But because we had talked about this as a plus up in our very first episode.
Yeah.
Of saying, gee, wouldn't it be nice if they acknowledged Walt and his connection to Lincoln in this?
Yeah.
And the rumors are abound that may actually be happening.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing is, and these are super unfounded.
Yes.
So please don't anyone assume that we're saying we know this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But what we've heard is there's a large renovation going on there. They're definitely working on a turntable of some sort inside the stage. And the rumor is that potentially an audio animatronic Walt might be coming into play. If that's true, then Pete is psychic, because this is exactly Pete's plush up for Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln.
And we have yet to figure out what they're going to do. I don't even think that Imagineering even knows what they're going to do. But there's another attraction that we also did a plus up on, which was the Golden Horseshoe, and which we talked about, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we came up with a whole new show and that kind of thing? And this is not exactly a happy plus up for us.
We kind of got the opposite.
Yeah, we kind of got the opposite on this one, which was, we're going to get rid of all performers right now.
Yeah.
So currently the Golden Horseshoe, as of this recording, is down, and there's some sort of rudimentary display that you mentioned.
Yeah. So I mean, the restaurant's still open, so you can get your chicken nuggets. Mm-hmm. But and I assume, is it still Pepsi? I forget.
I think Disney, and I'm sure somebody in the company is going to go, no, but I think it's actually Coke is their main sponsor.
I think you're right. And I was trying to remember this the other day, and I went, Pepsi doesn't sound right anymore.
Joan Crawford isn't around to bully Walt anymore, so we can't have Pepsi in the park anymore.
Right.
Walt, get out there and sell more Pepsi.
But seemingly,
that's my Harvey Fierstein doing Joan Crawford impersonation. I'm so sorry.
You heard it here first, folks. So, assumedly, to celebrate Juneteenth and the time around Juneteenth, there's currently a display on the stage of instruments that would have been played by black musicians at the turn of the last century, the late 1800s, early 1900s. I have to point out that what might have been a better tribute is to have black musicians play music on that stage.
Yeah.
But that's not what they did. They put some instruments there with some little cards on it.
Yeah.
I think just as kind of an overview of where we're going today, we're going to talk a little bit about going to Disneyland because it's cool.
Yeah.
And we're also going to talk about, and I can see the gears whirring in Pete's head when this came up. So we had a plan to talk about something more complicated, and we realized, we pushed ourselves probably harder than two gentlemen of our age should when we were in Anaheim. I came home quite sick.
I was very sore. I will be fair.
And so we said, let's tone it down. Let's do something a little simpler. And I could see what was happening in Pete's head. Pete was like, I'm going to figure out something that we can talk about that will not allow Kelly to tell me anything more about the dark water system at Disneyland. He was like, what is absolutely the farthest away from any of those points that he made me look at when we were at Disneyland? And
I have to admit, like, my beloved partner, Tanya, and we got together with Kelly and his family as well for dinner, and he mentioned this to Tanya, and she got this look on her face like, what the ever-loving? And she looked at me as if I was going to, join her in this. I go, no, it was actually quite fascinating. and that's when I realized, no, we really are, park buddies. We really know how to do this park together. Because I think that's the thing is that there are some people who just absorb the park and they go, entertain me. I just soak it in. Or I don't care. I'm just going to, some of the annual pass holders, I'm just going to be here for a couple of rides and leave.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's the way we do it. We look at it as we see every little nook and cranny and we're fascinated by it because of the history that goes into this.
I believe the thing that really Tanya could not believe was that I had sought out and taken multiple pictures of a light bulb that was painted half white and half red. A single incandescent light bulb.
Yeah. I mean, she could probably understand us looking for the Disney Legends, windows and going, ooh, there's Bob Gurr.
Which
and
we also
there's
did,
that person over there. And there's
Bill
Willie
Evans.
Crumb. Yeah, Bill Evans. There it is, And we were super thrilled. There's Dominguez's, window.
Yeah, Ron Dominguez, yeah.
Ron Dominguez. It was great. We really had to search for Ron Dominguez's window. It took us 2 days to find it, but we found it.
And it's odd, too, because I was there. It was put up. I was there that day.
Yeah.
And it wasn't where I thought it was.
It took a couple of Mickey Mouse chocolate chip cookies to get you to remember it.
That's right.
It was worth it.
Good brain food.
Yeah, it was good. I think I gained about 5 pounds at Disneyland, and it was worth every bit of it.
But before we move on, I do want to just a little bit more about our trip to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Because Pete and I got to guest on Paul Berry's wonderful Window to the Magic.
Hey, Paul. Yay. That was one of the best, one of the craziest, most frantic excursions in and out of the park I've ever been on.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun.
It was great. And, we never met Paul in person before. We communicated back and forth through emails. Yeah. Nicest guy in the world. We went out and met him in the Esplanade outside of Disneyland, and it was as if we had been friends forever. Like the three of us just took off. Mm-hmm. He explained a little bit of the ground rules, because if you haven't listened to his podcast, it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. What he does is he has these super high-end binaural recording microphones, and he'll walk through the parks so that when you listen to it back, you feel very immersed in the space. Yeah. You can be at Disneyland for a little while in your ears. And so he met up with us. We went in, we chatted with him for a while. We rode some rides. We rode the train all the way around, and Paul showed us a really cool thing that I never knew existed.
However, I'm going to actually say, you're going to have to listen to a show to find out what it is.
Oh, yes. Good call.
So, Paul, we're going to leave that one up to you.
Yeah. But yeah, we wandered around. We did some cool stuff with Paul. We chatted with him for, it was a couple hours. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be on the show around the 1st, I believe. I think he's just going to drop on the 1st.
Yep.
And if you're not familiar with Paul's show, here's a little bit about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in just a few moments, the Window to the Magic podcast show will begin.
My name is Patrick.
My name is Calvin.
I'm Mouseketeer Gray.
My name is Paul, and I will be your guide through the wonderful world of Disney sound experiences.
This show is a weekly trip into the world of the Disney theme parks and resorts.
And this is the place where you get to use your ears to surround yourself with the magic.
For your safety, please remain seated while listening to the WindowToTheMagic.com podcast.
Maybe there's a name for this, something like Disnotic Obsession. Please visit WindowToTheMagic.com for more information, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts and in the iHeartMedia app.
And we're back.
Hey, we're back.
Please do go. If you don't listen already to Windows to the Magic, please do. It's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, show him some love. It's a great show.
Yeah.
And he's been doing it now for 20 years almost.
Is it 20, 15, 20, something like that? Yeah.
Like that. He's coming up on one heck of an anniversary. And
yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So
anyhow. So the attraction that Pete came up with to keep me from talking about the singular flow of water from near Tomorrowland down to the rivers of America was the Autopia, because it's far away from all of that.
Yep, it's furthest away. And it's also one of the simpler-ish rides for us to talk about. But there's another reason that we chose this.
That's right.
And it happened to be, before we left, I think it was only a couple days before we left for the trip.
Yeah.
One of us found it on social media. We found an advertisement for it. Garner Holt Productions, one of the biggest and one of the most illustrious producers of animatronics in the world.
Probably the biggest, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've interacted with Garner. I mean, there's a lot of people in this fandom world and in industry who have interacted with him. He's very personable.
Yeah, nice guy.
Really nice guy, very sweet. He was throwing a charity event at his workshop. And by workshop, I mean gigantor warehouse. I had no idea it was going to be this huge.
If you've seen an animatronic this year, it probably started in that building.
Yeah. Yep. And we showed up. Kelly got a VIP pass. Mm-hmm. I got a standard pass because I was kind of running out of money at the time. And but we showed up, and the staff was wonderful. I think there was only about no more than 200 people at the whole thing, the whole shebang. And I actually think Tiki Maynard was there. And Maynard, if you're listening, please let us know in the comments if you showed up. But I didn't want to bug you. but you were super cool to me a whole bunch of different times.
Yeah.
And I just want to go, Maynard, but he was just in his own little world. But the person, yes, it was cool to see Garner. It was cool to see all the animatronics. It was cool to see Garner's collection, including the 2 cars from the Great Race.
Yeah.
Which
he just has.
Yeah, there's the Leslie Special. There's the Hannibal Twin 8. Like,
right.
What? But the person we went there to see was the Grand Maestro of Autopia.
Yeah.
Bob Gurr.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the whole point, was to go and see Bob Gurr.
Imagineering legend.
And we
Bob
said,
Gurr.
This is our final day down in LA together. Let's just give up a day at the park and we're just going to go meet Bob Gurr. Forget it. Let's just do it. So that's what we did. And we thought what was going to be like a little hour, little thing turned out to be like a 4.5 hour experience with this guy.
Yeah.
And it was cool.
It was crazy. And, we got to get pictures with Bob, talk to him a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. And he was very nice. He made jokes with me about his red shoes. He signed a bunch of stuff. We got some really cool prints signed by him. Yeah. And he gave this talk that was, I'd love to hear your take on this, actually, Pete.
Yeah.
Like, this was not the talk I thought he was going to give.
I agree.
Yeah, he looked at this audience. So Bob Gurr in his 90s is sharper than I'm ever going to be in my life.
Oh, yeah.
Looking good. He's smart. And he gave this wonderful speech about... he didn't want to kind of just dig into the same old stories he tells over and over again because he figured this crowd already knew that stuff.
Yeah.
So what he did was talk about how he got things done, like how he managed projects and how Walt got things done. And it was enlightening. It was eye-opening. It was smart. It was a little bit acerbic.
It was delightfully so. Sometimes you're used to watching some of these older Imagineers or animators go, "Oh, Walt was wonderful, and this was it was all, lollipops and Mickey Mouse."
Yeah.
And there were times where Bob, we would kind of look at each other across the room because Kelly's seated way up in front in VIP, and I'm all the way in the back row. Yeah. Trying not to be resentful. No, I wasn't resentful at all. I had paid for my own ticket. That's all. But Bob would just let these things out every once in a while where he was holding back, but at the same time he's like, no, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I kind of applaud that honesty.
Yeah.
I love it when I get to meet people who have worked in that company and on that particular park that have those types of stories. Like Rolly Crump would do that during some of his interviews. But Bob's talk, I agree with you. It wasn't just let's go down the lollipop tree of
here's a funny
Disney
thing that happened when I was at Disneyland.
It was like it was like a business lesson and a management lesson from Bob, and I really appreciated that. And when we got in line to get our stuff signed, we got these prints signed. I got Adventure Through Inner Space. Kelly got a couple. He got the monorail, and
and I got the People Mover and Inner Space as well.
Yep. And I told Bob, and Bob was kind of, when celebrities get into signing autograph mode, they kind of just zone out,
right?
Because they're getting stuff handed to them. They got their Sharpie, just whoop, whoop. And I said, Bob, I am an artist. I am a designer. I've designed stuff. But I also got my degree a master's degree in business and entrepreneurship. And it was really fascinating to hear you talk about some of the aspects of project management and planning from that aspect, from a business standpoint. So thank you so much for sharing that. And he just lit up going, there's not enough people who have that crossover, the creativity and the business. There's not enough people. I said, well, that's why I got my degree. Good for you. And I was like, yay, I got approval from Bob Gurr. That's my moment. And that was the end of the conversation. It was literally that quick.
And if you want a more thorough rundown of what Bob said, I wrote an article on Boardwalk Times about a week ago that goes into a lot more detail about it. But it's one of the other things that really stuck out to me was he was talking about when they were trying to build some stuff early on at Disneyland and how the unions were so partitioned that it was becoming difficult to do some crossover. And you think you know the end of the story. You think the end of the story is somehow we bucked the union and did something else. But that's not the end of the story. What he said was, so we formed a union that could do everything we needed to do.
Yep.
And I thought, well, there you go, right? He's not against representation, even when it got in the way. He found a way to keep representation for the workers and get stuff done.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
means a lot.
Yeah. So this was really, really great experience. And then Garner surprised all of us with, okay, we're going to take you to a part of the warehouse. And they've got it all parted off from curtains. They did not let us have phones and cameras out in certain parts of the warehouse.
Yeah, most of it,
except for this little reception hall that they had kind of erected. But we could take pictures in this one area. And if you've been following us on social media, you've probably already seen some of these pictures.
Yeah.
But they have apparently Garner has a collection of ride cars. So he has an original Peter Pan ride car. He has one of the original Dumbo ride cars.
Yeah.
He has one of the Mike Fink riverboats. Just standing, Mike Fink riverboat, like everybody does. And he has several other, he has stuff from other parks as well. And he has a train from another theme park that he's fully restored. I mean, it's the size of one of the Disneyland trains.
From Knott's, right?
I don't remember if it was from Knott's or some other park, but it's certainly the same type of make and size.
Yeah.
But he did surprise us with and Bob.
Yeah.
With something really interesting. And I guess we can talk about this because he
let us take pictures of it, so I can't imagine it's...
Yeah, he probably... he didn't say not to do this. So Garner, if you're mad at us, we apologize. But they unveiled a couple of pieces of a project that they're working on right now to restore a ride car. And it's one of the original trains from Nature's Wonderland.
Yeah.
And they had the smokestack and they had the lantern and I think they had the bell of the train. And they found one of Bob's blueprints. And so they put that you should have seen Bob's face when they pulled the stuff out. He was like, oh my God, I remember this. And he was so into it. So
it's a commission from Disney to restore the train.
Yeah.
They're collecting pieces right now. The pieces they can't collect, they're having fabricated. I don't know what they're going to do with it ultimately, but it's really cool that there's going to be still at least one existing mine train through Nature's Wonderland. I'm really excited about that.
That's so cool. So we've talked about Bob Gurr.
Yeah.
We talked about our experience. And if you have a chance, I'm going to do a quick little plug.
Yeah.
The Garner Holt Foundation and the Bob Gurr Foundation are both dedicated to helping out underprivileged children in certain areas of Los Angeles with different summer camp programs specifically designed towards kids who have an interest in animatronics.
Yeah.
They apparently did a recent version of the Garner Holt Foundation's get-together for camp for kids is they did animatronic hummingbirds.
Oh, cool.
And they were so cool. I checked it out, and I've already donated. I donated the name of this podcast, sent them $50. If you have a chance, for those who are listening, please visit the Garner Holt Foundation. And the Bob Gurr Foundation is a scholarship fund for people who also want to get into engineering and mechanics, etc. So please show a little love. Any little bit helps, but please help the Garner Holt Foundation and the Bob Gurr Foundation if you can.
Yeah.
So
thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, so plugs aside.
Yes.
Let's pull the plug on this this attraction, Autopia.
Autopia, the Richfield Autopia.
Yes. And Autopia is one of those attractions that actually isn't grandiose. And yet it is so beloved by so many people. Mm-hmm. And I grew up loving it. And it really is evocative of America's obsession with cars.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. You know, again, it's a perspective thing. Mm-hmm. So how we look at the Autopia now is pretty different than how people would have looked at the Autopia in 1955 when it opened up.
Absolutely.
And the thing to keep in mind is the interstate highway system. The actual bill to fund the interstate highway system was signed the year after the Autopia opened. So it actually was future facing.
Yes, it was.
The Autopia, this idea that you were going to go on these highways on great distances in your sole-owned car was really unusual.
Let me pull out our projector here for just a minute, our old educational projector here. And let's start. That's my bad projector sound effect, but President Eisenhower, in order to protect us from nuclear war, decided to actually build highways so it would be easier to evacuate large urban areas. And that's like so scary to me, is the fact that highways were born out of nuclear war fears.
You know, there's some question about that because it is, in fact, like the Interstate Highway and Defense Bill.
Yeah.
There is some question as to whether Eisenhower actually thought it was that significant towards defense, or that he just wanted to be able to draw from defense funds to pay for it.
That's true.
It's hard to say.
Well, he did actually appoint a certain judge who took over a certain principality that he felt needed to be reined in a little bit.
Yeah.
And he found a way how to actually keep the citizens of this particular municipality in check with a special mixture of Benzedrine and I had you going. Kelly's giving a serious look like, where's this going? That's right, they're calling it a freeway. Yeah, sorry, it's my Roger Rabbit reference there for a minute. Sorry.
Oh, no, that was good. You got me. You totally got me.
But anyhow, but all joking aside, yeah, it's regardless of whether it was just pork or whether it was an actual intention.
Yeah.
It comes out of the urban sprawl of the 50s.
Yeah, and there's something interesting that kind of goes on here. So defense was being funded a lot, obviously, because we'd just come out of the war. I think it's useful to look at the idea of leisure in America.
Yeah.
So in 1938, FDR signs a labor bill that says if you work more than 44 hours a week, you're on overtime. Mm-hmm. So a couple of years later, they shrink that down to 40 hours.
This generation of workers has a rendezvous with a coffee break.
So it's part of his attempts to get us out of the Depression.
Yeah.
So he signs that bill. A couple of years later, it comes down to 40 hours and limits work to 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. So prior to 1940, there was no limitation.
Yep.
So what this suddenly did was give people room for leisure. Mm-hmm. But that's cut a little short because we suddenly move into the war.
Yeah.
So we're in wartime production, all bets are off.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's not until after the war that do we really get to reap the benefits of this.
Right. Right.
And so coming out of the war, all of a sudden, people in America have this thing that they have literally never had before, free time.
Right.
Actually, as a quick aside, one major employer in the United States actually cut the work week down to 40 hours and to 5 days a week earlier than Roosevelt. Because in 1928, Henry Ford changed the hours and the pay for his employees because he discovered that no one working for him could afford to buy one of his cars.
Gee, it's a funny thing that.
And if they could, they didn't have time to use it. So he actually was trying. I mean, Ford is a very difficult figure in American history.
Oh, yeah.
But he was actually trying to get ahead of the federal government and push people to do this earlier. It didn't really take. Most other companies didn't do this. Mm-hmm. But Ford did. He had a 40-hour work week before most of the rest of the country did.
That's wild.
Yeah. And, talk about Autopia.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This moment when the middle class suddenly has access to automotive transportation.
Right. And they can now use it for their, 2 days of free time to go somewhere, which Disneyland was going to very much benefit by.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
There are 3 things I found, probably more than this, but 3 super interesting things that I found about the creation of the interstate highway system that benefited Disneyland.
Okay.
One of them's obvious.
Yeah.
It was that I-5 was planned roughly along the route of State Route 99.
Right.
Which went smack through Orange County, smack through Anaheim. And they knew that when they bought the land, that was coming.
Sure.
I read this great quote from Van France. You know Van France? He, early Disneyland guy, mostly known for creating the training program for Disneyland employees in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
But very deeply involved. It's a great quote about the fact that when they were opening Disneyland, the highway wasn't quite finished.
Oh, wow.
So he says in his book, Window on Main Street, by the authority I give myself for doing this history, I'll also give myself credit for completing the harbor off-ramp 2 days before opening. Cars would come down the freeway and hit a boulevard stop. Wood, this is C.V. Wood, who we talked about before.
Yes.
Wood warned us, without that off-ramp, traffic will be backed up to San Francisco. The problem was that the contractor's agreement stipulated that no overtime be paid by the state. I went to meet the superintendent of the job. Fortunately, he was a young guy who understood our problem. Without any paperwork, except C.V. Wood's okay, I said we'd pay for any overtime involved. I also threw in lunch if they could complete it before the opening day.
Oh, wow.
That off-ramp was completed 2 days before opening.
Oh, my God.
Crisis had been averted. We celebrated over lunch and cocktails. I got my off-ramp and a hangover to boot.
What?
Van France.
Oh, my goodness.
I actually found recently a copy online of Van France's unpublished memoirs of the early creation of Disneyland.
Oh, wow.
I don't know where this came from, but it's pretty fascinating. Anyway, so that's number one.
Okay.
That Disney obviously benefited by I-5 coming through.
Yeah.
Number two, we talked about in our last episode. Bill Evans.
Bill Evans.
Part of the reason that they were actually able to stock the Jungle Cruise and other parts of Disneyland with so many trees was because the guys making the interstate highway system were knocking them down.
Wow.
So Bill Evans would get in front of the plans, tag the trees, and pay them off to allow them to come remove them and take them over to Disneyland.
That's so cool.
So that's number two. The last one, do you remember, Pete, when we were in the Penny Arcade?
Yes.
At Disneyland.
Yeah.
And you started up that big musical Wurlitzer looking thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That particular instrument is there because of the interstate program.
What?
A significant portion of the musical instruments, the like ancient ones that used to populate the Penny Arcade and other things around Disney, including that specific one, came from the collection of a guy named Albert Clifford Rainey, who had a large assembly of mechanical music machines. In 1953, California was building the San Gabriel River Freeway, the 605, through the Rainey estate. And Rainey's widow, Ruby, decided to sell the collection. Walt was fascinated by them, bought 30 of them for the park.
Whoa.
So he bought all those. Rainey was also a collector of saloon art, all of which went to Knott's Berry Farm.
Ha ha. Okay, that's another episode I think we're going to have to look into.
Yeah.
The Rainey collection, like hunting down the remnants of the Rainey collection.
Isn't that great, though?
That's fantastic.
Like, just because of the interstate, Walt got these machines. Walt got a machine that you literally played a week and a half ago.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is really, really cool. Oh, my God.
All right. Yeah.
Well, and also a lot, I mean, this is also the golden era, the 1920s onward, of roadside attractions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, being who we are on our trip to Disneyland that we mentioned earlier, Kelly and I actually made a point of stopping at some of these roadside attractions on the Highway 5.
Yeah.
And one of which was Pea Soup Anderson's.
Right.
Which
we found a real old one.
Yeah, it's been around since the 20s. It's this weird, kitschy Norwegian style kitchen with gift shop.
Yeah.
And we mostly used it as a bathroom break and to stretch our legs. So we were driving for 2.5 hours. But that's the whole point, is that these things were set up all over the roadways of America, and everything ranging from come buy our oranges from our orange-shaped vending stall, or something as lavish as Pea Soup Anderson's. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose was a roadside attraction in order to allow people to stretch their legs, see something interesting, and then move along with their day. And so a whole industry of leisure, of the smaller time leisure of like, we don't need to charge them a huge amount of money, just a little bit, because there's going to be so many people driving past us.
Right, because it's leisure that you travel to. Which was unheard of before we started building the highways and before you had time to do it.
That's about it. The cars got you a little bit further, and you didn't have to deal with other travelers. You could move at your own pace, and that was big. That was really, really big. And I think that also built up people's identity with their cars. Because whenever we're hit in a car, I mean, I just said it. We are technically not hit. Our car is hit by another car. But we so identify with our vehicles that, I got hit in an accident the other day. No, actually you were inside your car that got hit.
Right.
Technically speaking, not to mansplain it too much, but that's actually what really happened. But that's the phenomenon that we have, and that identity with cars. And an association also leads to the customization of, Henry Ford himself. We'll sell it to you any color that you want as long as it's black. Right? But then you have their competitors saying, well, we offer it in creamy white. We offer it in lead paint white, But then, colored cars really started popping up in the early 30s, and the colors got brighter and bigger, and it just became more and more apparent that the cars were actually taking on they weren't just these cookie cutter cars the way that Ford and Chrysler and all these other companies that existed in those days were pumping out. Suddenly they were taking on new personalities, new shapes, new forms. And it was all about ego because people were spending so much time in their cars.
And this is kind of where Bob Gurr comes from. Because Bob Gurr starts off his career as a car stylist. He is designing the look of cars. He doesn't become a real kind of grease monkey engineer until he's working for Disney for a while and they don't have anyone else to do it.
Right.
The Lowdown on the Plus Up is a Boardwalk Times podcast. At boardwalktimes.net, you'll find some of the most well-considered and insightful writing about the Walt Disney Company, Disney history, and the universe of theme parks available anywhere. Come join us at boardwalktimes.net.
So while we're talking about the past here. Because everybody who's listening to this probably already has a good notion of Autopia. Okay. And we'll get to that. But I want to, this is one of the things that we're known for here is we're going to give you a lowdown. Okay. And the lowdown is the origins of Autopia, has very, very deep roots, not just in America's obsession with cars, but also how that permeated throughout popular culture. And it actually stems from carousels. Okay? This is where it starts. Carousels. I have restored 2 carousels in my lifetime. One of which is in Los Gatos, California, the Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad.
We need to go down to that.
We do. That'll be another show in its own. And I helped restore another one that was in Santa Cruz. But there were 2. The carousels are as old roughly as the 1600s. The notion of having a mechanized arc that takes you around in a circle over and over and over again in various speeds. And you have various designs in which you have some carousels in which they're buckers, in which they go up and down. Some they just stand completely still. Carousels were actually mostly designed to travel. So they would all fold up. They usually have their calliope and their engine, usually driven by steam, and later by electricity, but mostly by steam, and this as a center wagon.
Yeah.
So usually there's 2 wagons in a circus for a carousel or a carnival. One is to carry all the horses and the platforms and all of the panels.
Right.
The rest is all just one wagon just for the engine itself. Well, carousels really started taking off in the 1860s, especially when you have a lot of traveling fairs all over the place. All of the the carnival circuit was really building up in the 1870s, post-Civil War. And then you actually had an event in California that changed the look of carousel horses. Most of the time, carousel horses were usually you can always tell when they were built. If they are earlier than 1870, they are usually carved with their feet extended both in the front and in the back.
Yeah.
If they are post 1870, they usually have their hooves underneath them, or if their feet are extended, they are extended to more natural form, like they're rearing up. And the reason is because of the experimentations and animation by Edward Muybridge.
Yeah.
Because no one had actually photographed a horse in motion before. And I think the artist's name was Massenet, who actually was very famous for painting horses, actually wept when he saw the photographs because he'd been painting the horses incorrectly in running stance. Their hooves are, when they're extended outward, that is not when they are off the ground, all 4 of them. Their hooves are off the ground when all 4 are underneath the horse. Okay. So usually when you have horses going up and down on a carousel, the legs are extended outward because it makes it easier for the pole to go up and down.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of those buckers, because of the ones that go up and down, ladies in big skirts and bustles can't usually get on them and maintain their ladylike notion. So carousel manufacturers like Denzel, like Loof, all these other manufacturers started experimenting with other forms of transportation on a carousel.
Okay.
And they started off with a gondola, which is basically like it's a couple of benches, usually surrounded with some sort of ornately carved side.
Yeah.
It'd be a swan or a dragon or a hippocampus or something like that. And it gently rocks back and forth. Sometimes
isn't the hippocampus part of your brain?
Yes. Hippocampus is a seahorse.
Is it? Okay.
That's exactly what they call a seahorse. So they were called
I was like, are we writing a brain
in
stem?
America, they're called seahorses.
Okay.
In Europe, they call them hippocampi on the carousels.
All right.
So you have the rocking or you have the spinners where they gently spin around Mr. Toad style, or I'm sorry, teacup style. My dog is Mr. Toad, so I've been saying his name a lot. But the gondola would rock gently back and forth, thus allowing ladies to demurely sit while their gentlemen would ride the horses. They were supposed to be sitting on the gondola. It didn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
But that was the original intention. In 1906, in England, you actually see a new type of gondola show up. Actually, I should back up for a minute. Carousels, like any ride, there's a one-upmanship that happens. So you have a standard carousel that just goes around in a flat plane. So now I'm talking about the evolution of innovations. And so this is where it really, like I said, this is a deep dive. Now you have to make it more thrilling. How do you do it?
Yeah.
You do what is called a switchback, in which the gondolas and horses would then climb a hill and then rise up in the back of the ride and then go downhill at the front. So it goes up and down as well as side to side. Thus giving you the notion of you're climbing up a hill and you're racing down a hill with all of the different rows.
Yeah.
The switchbacks were very, very popular during the turn of the century. So we're talking 1899 to 1905. In 1906, that's when you actually see a new type of gondola in order to promote a new mode of transportation as a way to sell this notion of these machines that were actually terrifying to some people. not everybody grasped the automobile.
We're talking about the horseless carriage.
We're talking the horseless carriage.
Yeah.
They were used as so they would take the engines out and they would put them on, and instead of having gondolas or horses, it would just be a circle of cars going up and down and up and down.
They would actually, okay, I'm blown away. So they would actually take the outer frame of the car, they take the engine out, and take the outer frame and mount it on a carousel?
Wheels and all.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And they would usually have about a dozen cars of different styles.
Yeah.
And if for those who might be trying to imagine your head, we'll post it on our Facebook. I have some photographs of these. But they basically look like Mr. Toad's car, with the big open seat with the leather, the tuck leather. So if you ever looked at the Mr. Toad, just imagine that huge and with 3 rows of vehicles. So it's like, take the Indiana Jones Jeep and you mix it with Mr. Toad's car and you get these horseless carriages that they're trying to sell.
Wow.
And that's what people would go around on. And this was kind of the first time. I mean, I've got a book, part of my collection here. It is called Fairground Art by Jeff Whedon and Richard Ward. It's a British book. It's one of my reference manuals for a lot of my deep dives, but also I used it as a way to help me put together carousels.
Yeah.
But it's been in my collection for some time. But French manufacturers like Peugeot, Daimler Chrysler, and even Ford with American switchbacks would put cars and eventually to even put motorcycles.
Wow.
On these
and
rides.
This is like in like the 1900s?
Yes. The early 1900s. That's how these
amazing.
were all set up. And so this kind of begins the car as an amusement ride.
And it's fascinating because this resembles so much the thing that Walt Disney and Bob Gurr put together for the World's Fair that is not a World's Fair with the Ford Magic Skyway.
Yep.
Coming back around to Henry Ford.
100%.
Right. So they basically took the frames of Ford cars and stuck them on poles.
Now we're going to, so I'm going to go through this natural progression here.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is going to be a little Pete heavy for a minute, and then I'm just going to totally hand it over to Kelly.
A little peaty.
This is going to be a little peaty at first, but trust me.
Like a fine Scotch.
You'll dig this. You'll dig this. Yeah, it's fine. Fine Scotch. In the 1920s, 2 amusements come out.
Yeah.
And it is because of the advent of electric motors.
Yeah, okay.
And the use of conducting electricity through different poles. Okay. The first one is a carnival attraction.
Yeah.
And you would walk into this tent, and there would be basically, essentially, a slot car, a gigantic slot car track on the inside of this tent.
Yeah.
And there would be a chalkboard with numbers written on it, 1 through 10 or 1 through 8, whatever. And you would bet on which car would win the next race.
Yeah.
The pilots of these cars were monkeys.
Oh.
Monkey tracks. And so for those of you who like the squirrel nut zippers, they actually have a song called The True Macaque in which they're talking about monkey races. And these terrified, simians are stuck in these little slot cars going around and around in circles. But how they're guided is not just a slot car. They're on a track with a metal pole right underneath the car that keeps them from going too far left or too far right.
Oh, wow.
You see where I'm getting with this?
I do.
Okay. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through the design.
If only they'd thought of that right away with the Autopia. Took them a few rounds.
They didn't test it with monkeys. They should have tested it with monkeys.
They almost did.
Spam in a can. The other thing that came out roughly about the same time was 2 guys named Max and Harold Stroher. They were brothers from Lawrence, Massachusetts, and they took the electric car design and they took the monkey track design a step further. And they said, rather than putting monkeys in this, let's take it off the track. And instead of having the track electrified underneath with just a simple pole that goes up into it, what if we make the floor metal? and we have a pole reaching up to the ace, the positive and the negative, and basically you're driving a circuit.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And they created the Dodgems. That's what they originally called it. What we call bumper cars.
Yeah.
And the Dodgem
Early
Corporation...
Daleks, really.
Yeah. The Dodgem Corporation installed its first bumper car traction just a few miles away from their own factory at a shop at Salisbury Beach in Massachusetts as early as the 1920s.
Huh.
And the Dodgem Corporation sold its business in 1961, and its subsequent owners stopped making rides in 1970. So they had been around a long time, 50 years of making Dodgem cars.
Yeah.
The appeal of the Dodgem car is not about driving. It's about whacking the hell out of whoever else is driving there.
Yeah.
And thus that becomes one of the next seeds that gets planted of the elements of Autopia. So that's my back in time deep dive on some of the early influences that may have shaped Autopia.
The thing I'm most amazed by that story is that you pulled it together. I was like, where is he going?
Welcome. I have a couple of students who listen to the show, and they're probably going, Kelly, this is what every day is like for us.
You think I'd figure it out by now. But man, you landed that one.
You never know where I'm going to go. It's like, where's he going? Like, because Kelly was actually giving me this look on his face like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? We're running out of time. Give me a break. Oh,
no.
Wait, he actually got it here. Oh my God, he got it.
It was more befuddlement than anything. but we got it there.
Yeah.
I want to kind of, because we talked about bumping, I kind of want to just jump into the history of the attraction itself a little bit.
Absolutely.
And, I don't want to go too awfully deep in because you can get that anywhere.
Yeah.
The attraction, it's being built prior to Disneyland opening. Bob Gurr, whose title is the Director of Vehicular Development.
Nice.
A title which he pretty much kept his entire career. Yeah. In fact, it was joked about that when he left Disney, his title had not changed from the day from what it was when he started. And I have a quote from him. He said, I had no inkling when I started that I would be doing mechanical engineering. I was a car stylist at the time, but I worked up from there, and I've been doing this stuff ever since. It's
kind of cool, actually.
It's really cool, and, we got this a lot from listening to him talk, where he said, you just did it.
Yeah.
You figured out what needed to be done, and you learned how to do it. I mean, this is the guy that learned trigonometry so he could figure out how to design the Matterhorn.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's... there's something to be said for that type of mentality.
Yeah, the first tubular steel roller coaster in the world. No one had ever built one like that before.
Wow.
Just amazing.
Yeah.
The first cars he designed to look like Italian Ferraris. They were 7.5 horsepower. The engine could go up to 25 miles an hour, but they had a governor that stopped them at 11.
Except for that one, probably, where you actually see him doing a Tokyo slide. That's one of my favorite photographs of Bob. It's just like, sliding one of those things sideways.
Well, there were 3 cars that did not have the governor. And actually, I'll go a little bit more into this in a second. But the 3 cars were one that was a show car that was built for Walt. It was often just on display. It was metallic maroon, red and white leatherette interior. Wow. And a re-welded actual Pontiac bumper. That one could go the full speed. Also, there were 2 police cars.
Really?
That were designed to look like sheriff cars. Now, you have to remember, when the Autopia first opened, it wasn't on a track. I mean, it was in these lanes.
Right.
But the lanes were 2-car wide. It was intended that you could pass each other.
Oh, wow.
So the police cars were there literally to go keep people in line.
Why am I imagining Cubby from the Mouseketeers? Pull over! Or worse, Roy Williams.
Yeah.
Roy, pull over!
Roy coming to breathalyze you on the Autopia. Yeah.
Touch your finger to your nose there, kiddo.
So those were the Mark I cars.
Okay, Mark I's.
They were not super resilient. They had some problems. The 2-lane thing was not working real great.
Yeah.
In 1956, the second Autopia, the Junior Autopia, was built over on the Fantasyland side. They built Mark II cars for those. They had slightly different engines. They had Wisconsin engines instead of Gladden engines. I don't know what that means either. They were built with extender blocks on the accelerator because the Junior Autopia was for smaller kids. Oh. Eventually, they started replacing all of the Mark I's with these Mark II's anyway, though. For both tracks.
Sure.
Bob Gurr then built a single Mark III car. It was an experimental one with a different kind of clutch and a different kind of engine. They never built another one. So there were a bunch of Mark I's, a bunch of Mark II's, one Mark III.
Okay.
And right around that same time, the Tomorrowland Autopia, the main one, they got rid of that 2-car lane.
Yeah.
It just was a nightmare. So they ended up making it 2 single-car lanes so they could double the capacity.
Okay.
They built Mark IV cars, also new engines, Kohler engines with Doris gearboxes, but the same Ferrari body. In 57, the Midget Autopia opened. So now we've got 3.
Right.
We've got the Tomorrowland Autopia is the big one, the Junior Autopia in Fantasyland, and the Midget Autopia. The Midget Autopia is kind of an Autopia just in name. It actually is just a dark ride car put on a track. The kids have no power over it.
See part where monkey races. I mean, it's...
Yes. Exactly. And you could bet on them. And, if you could find Roy from the Mouseketeers.
He was usually hiding inside the yellow barn.
Yeah. He was like, I'll take the little toe-headed kid. Yeah.
Wow. It's got really dark.
So in 1959, they opened the new Tomorrowland with the subs, the Matterhorn, and the monorail.
Wow.
The Fantasyland Autopia, what used to be the Junior Autopia, was expanded, so it was as big as the other one. So now they had 2 full-sized Autopias.
What year was this again?
1959. That's when the new Tomorrowland opened.
Okay.
You now had 2 full-sized Autopias. The tracks were very ingeniously designed because both tracks would kind of meet up and you would end up side by side with the other Autopia. And occasionally you would actually be sort of facing the other Autopia. So they merged like an actual highway of the future. The Mark IV cars were replaced by what they call the Mark V car. Mm-hmm. This is where the smashing into each other thing becomes a real problem. This was called the committee car. The reason it was called the committee car was, I'll quote Bob Gurr here.
I knew you were going there.
By 1959, we had decided to build an entirely new car instead of continuing to evolve the first car any further. We went to a car designed by all these consultants and experts, and they tended to disagree with each other. The Mark V reflected everything that everybody wanted, and as a result, became the worst car ever.
Oh, my God.
The car was so massive and so heavy, it would take chunks out of the concrete curbs.
Oh, my God.
It was a massive car.
Wasn't that the
Super
one
heavy.
that was actually styled after the Stingray?
No, that's coming up.
Okay.
So after that, in 1963, Aero Development, who did a lot of theme park vehicles, amongst other things, said, we can make you a new one.
Okay.
So they built something that was the Mark VI. Gurr was not much involved in it.
Okay.
He did come out and seem to do some styling stuff towards the end, but for the most part, it was Aero Development on their own.
Okay.
Their whole deal was, you had a problem with these big, heavy cars. We're going to make a super light one. The way that you make the structure light is by making it weaker.
Oh, dear.
So they would slam into each other and the entire chassis would bend or buckle or snap.
Aye.
And the only way to fix them was to weld the pieces back together, which made them heavier and heavier and heavier. So they were weak and getting heavier.
Lead sleds. They were turning into lead sleds.
That's right.
Oh, my God.
That's right.
Wow.
Right after that is the one that was designed. It was actually not designed after the Stingray. It was designed exactly at the same time as the Stingray.
Interesting. Okay.
And Gurr says that he met someone that worked on the design of the Stingray. They looked at each other's designs and just shook their heads going, we don't know how this could have possibly happened. So it was a much better car, not so rigid. It could actually handle a little compression on its frame. So if you bumped into each other, things would not suddenly break. Mm-hmm. The bumper and the frame was high. The seats were low. There were no holes or welds to weaken it. That had a Kohler engine, a Mapo clutch, and Doris gearbox.
So, real quick, I want to put a pause.
Yeah.
The styling of you mentioned nobody knows how this mixture happened.
Yeah.
There's a legend, and I'm saying it's a legend. It's a great apocryphal story, but it is a legend.
Yeah.
The Corvette. Let's talk about the Corvette for just a second. I grew up in a Corvette driving household, so I have to show this story off for a moment.
Okay.
When they switched over from it looks like an electric shaver, the earlier Stingrays, where it still had the steel body of the early 60s, and became the fiberglass body Stingray that we know now. Mm-hmm. Some people have speculated it was inspired by, obviously using this new technology of fiberglass was a big deal. But also, there's a rumor on how the shape of the Stingray took place. Because let's think about when this was designed. What year was this designed?
1963.
Okay. 1963 is a changing time. And one of the things that they needed to sell big time was, and this was, sex was becoming much more prevalent in advertising. So the rumor is...
we're doing the Wizard of Bras later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't tell the story. I'm going to tell it anyway. The rumor is that the designers at Chevy taped together this humongous piece of paper and got a huge arc light, and they hired a local stripper. Some people who tell this legend say it was Marilyn Monroe. I think they're full of caca. But and I think
likely.
This is a great story because once you hear this, you're never going to unsee this. When you look at a Stingray from the side and from the top,
right?
They had her stand upright with her arms up on her head like this, and they just traced her outline.
Yeah.
So you have the long nose of the Stingray that bells out. And then the waistline is right where the doors into the car, and then it kind of buckles out a little bit. That's where the torso would be, and then there's the back of the car.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's the top of the car. And then they had her lay down on her side, kind of odalisque style, and they traced that. That's the side silhouette of the car.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a great story. But now that I know that story, I cannot unsee that every time I look at those models of cars.
Right.
So anyway, that's a fun little apocryphal legend. So, Bob, if you're listening, please tell us who that model was, because obviously you were there.
Obviously you saw the same model.
Yeah, you seen the same model. Maybe it was Marilyn Monroe. I don't know. The only thing I had on when I was being photographed was the radio.
Well, and so that was the most successful design. That stayed the design for like 25, 26 years.
Oh, yeah.
It stayed the design till long after Richfield Oil, who were the original sponsors, stopped sponsoring it.
Yeah.
By the way, did you know that there was an official gas of Disneyland?
No. Tell me who the official gas of Disneyland is.
It is Richfield boron gas.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, I looked a little bit up about Richfield boron gas. I mean, Richfield, obviously a big gas company. The boron, it turns out that if you take boron, or you take the acidified version of boron that you mine, and somehow integrated into like petroleum products. Like it forms this kind of lubricant. It's very much an early version of like Techron.
Oh my gosh.
So it was this fuel that was high octane, 100 octane.
Whoa.
So like crazy high.
Whoa.
With this extra lubricant made out of boron in it.
Oh.
Now it is not. Looking into this, I was like, is that what they used for the Autopia? It's not.
Okay.
They used
that's what I was worried like for a minute, going, oh my God, no wonder every baby boomer's messed up.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
No, they used Richfield ethyl gasoline for the actual Autopia.
I don't know if that's better.
I don't. I think it's either you're ingesting lead or boron fumes.
God.
Have you ever been down to the city of Boron, California?
There's a city called Boron?
Oh, yeah. It's named after the boron mines that are there. And
oh, my God. I hear it's a pretty boron place.
It's a little south of Bakersfield.
Okay.
I drove through there once because a friend of mine was like, you need to drive through Boron on this trip you're making. And I was like, okay. Boron is a ghost town in progress. It is. Apologies to the 2,000 of you that currently live there. It is a town that has been dying for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Getting back to the interstate highway system that we were talking about earlier, it pretty much bypassed them.
Oh, wow.
So they were a moderately vibrant small town that had this huge mine. They supplied more than half the boron that's used in the world.
Wow.
But when the highways came in, it just bypassed the city altogether, and it just slowly began dying.
I'm looking at Google Maps while he's talking about this, and he's absolutely right.
Right? It's like it is on the verge of being a ghost town.
Wow.
Oh
my God. In Google Maps, there's actually a tumbleweed right in the middle of this. Okay. As Kelly's talking about ghost towns, there it is. Okay. Wow.
Anyway, just the interesting side note.
Okay.
Boron,
That's
California.
So cool. I had no idea that that's the fuel that they were using. That is so wild.
Yeah, and Richfield sponsored it up through 1970. And here's an interesting thing I learned about that.
Huh.
There was another attraction that Richfield sponsored at Disneyland. I had never heard about this before.
Uh-huh.
Never. And, you and I know a good amount about this stuff. So tell me if you've heard about this. It was an attraction called The World Beneath Us.
I don't know this one.
It was there from 1955 to 1960.
Wow.
And here's what it was. It was a bunch of sort of displays that included like large-scale models. There was some models of geographic area outside of Los Angeles that had a little motor under it so it could simulate an earthquake. Like a diorama.
Okay.
You'd walk through, you'd look at these models, and then you would go into a little room where there was an animation that Disney had put together specifically for this.
Huh.
And it was, it's so bizarre. I gather that there was someplace on the coast in Southern California that had a large area of oil reserves.
Okay.
But to get oil up out of the ground, you need some pressure. Usually you need like water pressure or gas pressure or something to pump it up.
Right. Okay.
And these oil reserves had no more pressure. So there was a bunch of landowners, mostly farmers, that owned this area with a bunch of oil that nobody could get out. So the world beneath us had this animated professor explaining how you could pump seawater into oil reserves to build up the pressure so you could get them out.
So it's basically Ludwig van Drake talking about how we're going to actually do fracking.
Right, and trying to get some sort of some sort of purchase on legislation or some sort of drive with the landowners in this one specific area of California.
Wow.
To get them to extract this oil.
Wow.
So that was Richfield's other attraction.
That is bizarre. I'm looking pictures right now of this thing. It's insane.
It's really fascinating.
And it wasn't that
isn't
far
it?
off. I mean, the picture of the professor is kind of a human Ludwig von Drake.
He totally is. Yeah,
He's great, actually. It's a Ward Kimball designed type character. It's really, really awesome. There's posters of, like, see us at the exciting Richfield show, The World Beneath Us in Tomorrowland. It's free.
Yep.
Because we really got to push something. And the professor's riding on a mastodon, which is, it's a La Brea Tar Pits kind of connection.
Yeah, I saw a quote from a postcard of the time where it just said, "The world beneath us in CinemaScope and Technicolor. This Walt Disney cartoon motion picture tells the story of oil, presented by the company which fills your car with the West's foremost premium Richfield boron gasoline, over 100 octane."
Oh, jeez. Wow. Wow. That's all I got to say is wow.
Yeah. This month at Boardwalk Times, we're talking about Doctor Who, Universal's Dark Universe, which Avengers might be returning to the MCU, and why the Disneyland Resort is canceling so much live entertainment. Come check it all out at boardwalktimes.net.
Before we get into the 70s, we have to talk about Midget Autopia.
Yeah.
Because, before we start moving forward with Autopia, we have to mention that this very sweet little ride for kids, because parents couldn't ride. The cars were so small.
Yeah.
They were designed specifically for children to ride them.
Yeah.
Or monkeys, either way. but the Midget Autopia just could not survive for several reasons. One, it was kind of I hate to use the term, a kind of a rinky-dink little attraction. It was starting to fall off in popularity.
Yeah, you couldn't drive the cars was part of it. Like it was just a dark ride car.
Yeah, you turn it on and off it goes. I mean, it literally was like monkey racing, where the monkeys are not actually in control.
Yeah.
1966, the not World's Fair
Yeah.
is finished, and the all of these attractions that have gained a huge amount of popularity are going to either go into storage, get destroyed, or they're going to come to Disneyland. And the one that is very definitely going to come to Disneyland is It's a Small World.
Yes.
And they need a place to put it. And so they tear out Midget Autopia in 1966.
Right.
In order to make room for It's a Small World. However, remembering his roots, and also as kind of like he had a little soft spot for this sweet little ride, Walt sent all the cars to Marceline, Missouri.
For the Midget Autopia.
The Midget Autopia. Just packed them all up and gave them to Marceline to set up a Midget Autopia in the middle of a park out in Marceline.
Huh.
And they did. They designed the track. They laid it all out. They put the ride up. And it lasted for another 10 years until finally in 1976 it was torn out. Mostly because people in Marceline couldn't afford to, there wasn't enough people. It's like everybody was like, I've already ridden that. I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, right.
And you don't have a lot of people at this point who are Disney fanatics going, I'm going to drive all the way out to Marceline to go see this.
Right.
Now there is. Now people are definitely going out there to go see Disney stuff.
Yeah, it's becoming much more of a tourist attraction.
Absolutely. Including a certain bed and breakfast that is going to be installed that we heard about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
One of the people who runs Garner Holt actually told us that they have recently acquired a bed and breakfast out there, but I'll let them unveil that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the ride you can still see today. The track still exists, and you can actually see the big metal post sticking out where the center rail would be.
Oh, huh.
And you can walk the trail of Midget Autopia in Marceline still. It's just it's like a little paved path, and it backs and forth. It switches back and forth, and it's really cute. But the cars have been spread to the 9 winds. Collectors out there have, I've got my Midget Autopia car out in my Disney collection. That's cool. But yeah, that's the life of Midget Autopia. And at the same time, while that is going on, they refurbish Fantasyland Autopia and regular Autopia to kind of goose it a little bit. In 1989, here's another deep dive.
Okay.
Okay. The deep dive is the advent of cable television. Okay? And cable television in the mid-'70s is rearing its ugly head. As a matter of fact, there would be trailers in front of Disney films saying, don't get cable TV. It's evil. You're going to pay for television. This is evil. Seriously. I mean, you could look these up. There would be movie trailers, not necessarily Disney specific, but there would be movie trailers at movie theaters basically saying, don't buy cable TV. It's evil. While cable TV is rising, we've got a company that is starting to struggle.
Yeah.
They're putting out all these, they're going through Walt's dying list of live action Kurt Russell movies. And, you know, the computer wore tennis shoes and all these other, you know, Gus the Mule and all these other live action pushes.
Yeah.
And Disney is actually starting to implode a little bit when it comes to its intellectual property. And the theme parks are also suffering at this time.
Yeah.
So Disney has to come up with another way how to make money or die.
Yeah.
So they decide, well, we have this huge stable of cartoons. Why don't we get one of these cable stations and just play cartoons on it? And that's the birth of the Disney Channel.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, we see the rise of Disney-oriented programming where you have movies, you know, that they could pull. They could show the classic cartoons.
Yeah.
They started making original content. And it's starting to build up quite a following. Everybody's talking about old cartoons again.
Yeah.
Awesome. And roughly about that time is when Disney starts producing one of its first new original animated series, The Gummy Bears.
Yeah.
And that gains a popularity on ABC.
Are you taking us down to Gummy Glen, Pete?
Gummy Bears! Yeah, I used to watch that religiously. And then you have more development where people are looking at these older characters saying, I love these old cartoons. And Disney took this attitude of, let's take some of these old characters that weren't necessarily stars and turn them into stars.
Yeah.
So then they release DuckTales. Woo! Yeah. And then you have
Tailspin,
Chippendale's Rescue Rangers,
Darkwing Duck.
And you can probably see where I'm going with this. Because the popularity grows, and so by 1991, so this is a stretch of about 6 or 7 years of this growing content.
Yeah.
That now you have a new generation of kids that have been raised on this and want to see this in the park.
Yeah.
So what does Disney do? They say, we need to represent it, but we're not really making a lot of money with the park right now.
Yeah.
And we're having some legal and financial issues that we're dealing with right now. So what's the quickest, cheapest way for us to represent this material?
Yeah. Which is huge. I mean,
it is.
It's probably hard for people who weren't growing up at that time to know how big the Disney afternoon was. It was a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I taped them. I had stacks of videotapes of Tailspin and Chippendale and DuckTales. I love those shows.
Yeah.
So you've got these little kids that have grown up on Gummy Bears and Tailspin, and now they're teenagers who are starting to drive. So what do? You change Fantasyland Autopia to the Rescue Rangers Raceway.
Yeah, I remember, and I actually never got out there when they were doing the Disney afternoon stuff. But everyone I've ever talked to that did was so disappointed.
It was a big sign to get on the ride. And that was pretty much what, anybody who's ever gone to one of these candy cane lane street decoration things, and most large enough cities will have one neighborhood that's totally into Christmas.
Yeah.
And inevitably, there's that one house that has the big automated merry-go-round with lights all over it with dolls on it.
Yeah.
And almost everybody has cutouts of Disney characters. That's kind of what the raceway was like. It's like, here's this diorama or a billboard featuring Baloo. Watch it on ABC. It was a way to kind of pump it through. The ride was still fun. It was the same old track.
Yeah.
You were still zipping around on these cars and whacking into each other. But it was much more about teenagers. Right. And that was cool. But it was always, it felt a little tacked on. But in 1999, they merged the tracks of Fantasyland, aka Rescue Rangers Raceway, with Fantasyland, with the rocket rods intersecting with them. They extended the track so that we had actually drove over and around the Autopia because they needed longer track to get over the people mover track. And it was terrifying to be driving your Autopia. You're just like, but, and all of a sudden, zipping past you, this weird Mad Max looking framework zipping past you. It was absolutely terrifying.
Couple of interesting things about this reopened Autopia, which reopened just in the beginning of 2000. Chevron had taken over the sponsorship. They'd been unsponsored for like 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
But Chevron took over. That's when we get the Mark 8 cars.
Yep.
Which are the very cartoony looking cars.
Based off of the Chevron commercials that were designed by Aardman Animation, the people behind Wallace and Gromit.
I did not know those were Aardman.
Yep.
That's great.
The original
That's really cool.
claymation were Aardman's. Yeah.
And here's a weird piece of trivia about the 2000 Autopia. The music you would occasionally hear, both in the loading area and on the ride, was the old People Mover soundtrack.
Oh, that makes my heart hurt.
Yeah, they just lifted it and put it there instead.
I wish they had, at least kept the Tron tunnel in there.
Yes. Hey, how cool would that be to be on your Autopia? And
you have entered the game grid of Tron. What? I
don't understand.
What is that? You might as well be saying you're going to be driving with Condor Man.
You have escaped. What'd I do?
Yeah, I didn't do anything. I just sat in the people mover. Yeah, that music, and it's wonderful. I mean, it's a great little homage to the past, but it's kind of weird.
I'd rather have the people mover.
Yeah, I agree. Strangely enough.
I remember it being a big deal when it opened again. And kind of thinking, it's the Autopia. Is it really that big a deal? But it was nice.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is the fact that it was a bigger track.
Yeah.
It's still not a people eater. Because it takes forever to get onto this thing.
Yeah.
Because you have the load in, load out. Then you have to move cars that need refueling, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's a big deal. But they did things to the line that made it interesting, where you could see videos of the Chevron cars animated. You could buy the model cars.
Right.
Which, by the year 2000, we had already entered into this era. I find it weird, and this is going to move into our last portion of our show here. I find it weird that you would go to Innoventions, which was the Carousel of Progress and America Sings area, in which you
Did
had
my eyes roll audibly.
They did. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Like the sides of your eyeballs were whiter than Space Mountain. It was amazing. A lot of these companies were touting environmentally friendly technologies like wind power, solar, and in the future, the house of the future. And Autopia is like Chevron.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're all talking about global warming here, and Disney is like pushing Chevron really hard to the point where you're buying cars. And again, that just shows the world's obsession with cars.
Right. We're about to get to the present where that's about to be addressed. But 2016, speaking of interventions, Honda takes over.
Yes.
And Honda introduces Asimo, the robot.
Oh, yeah.
Who was originally stationed in Innoventions. He was originally part of that.
Yep.
And then when Honda took over, they put him in various places around the track and stuff with his friend Bird.
I've always wanted to see a cage match.
Between Asimo and Bird?
No, between Asimo and Tom Morrow.
Oh.
Wouldn't that be a robotic, battle fest? That would be.
And maybe Sir from Alien Encounter.
Oh, I'm in there.
Yeah.
So there. Well, the referee is going to be Rex, from Star Tours. Hi, everybody. This is my first Robot Wars. You just, there would never be a fight because tomorrow's, oh, yes, it's a beautiful thing. Hoo-ha, because it's Robin Williams with the voice of Tom Morrow. It's like, Asimo's like, just fight.
Well, then, so leading up to kind of what's going on with the Autopia now, and I think it was really great that we got to see Bob Gurr talk about this a little bit. They have decided that they finally are going to replace all of the combustion engines, the gasoline engines, with electric engines.
Yes.
And I will quote Bob Gurr on this. He said, "Thank God."
Yeah. 2 big thumbs up. He leaned over in his chair. Thank God, with big thumbs up.
Yeah.
And the audience applauded. The locals are thrilled to hear about this change. The Los Angeles Times in April wrote an article about this, that the activists were petitioning Disney of getting rid of the gasoline engines over and over and over again. And finally, Disney listened. And in a written statement, it says here in the Los Angeles Times. So this article is April 19th, 2024. So in a written statement, Disneyland spokesperson Jessica Good confirmed to the Los Angeles Times that electrification means fully electric. It does not mean hybrid or any other version of a gasoline combustion engine. They are going full electric with these cars.
Excellent.
And she added that the theme park will no longer be using the current engines within the next 30 months.
Yeah.
So this is within 3 years, Autopia is going to be fully electric.
That's amazing. You know, my wife pointed out to me earlier today that if you are on the giant Ferris wheel at California Adventure, which you will never get me on, but if you were on it at one of the peaks, you can see one of the largest solar farms anywhere that Disney uses to power a tremendous amount of stuff in the parks. Obviously, that power is going to go straight to those Autopia cars, and that's great.
Absolutely. And so this is...
Do you know, by the way, where the single largest solar farm in the country is?
No, tell me.
Just outside of Boron.
Oh, really?
Weirdly, yeah.
Okay. Well, that is
right
weird.
outside. Right, it's because it's right on the edge of the Mojave.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's our next road trip. We're going to go to Boron.
Yeah. Just hang out in Boron.
Well, we'll probably make a trip out to, like, Calico. Like, go to Old Calico, but we'll stop in Boron.
Yeah.
Just to go, yep, we've been to Boron.
So we get to the meat and potatoes here. Which is the potatoes and which is the meat? I'm
not going to comment at all. I'm feeling kind of potato-y these days. Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna get to the second part of our show's title, the plus up, in which we pay no attention to safety or budget or any other type of constraint, and we plus up the attraction that we're discussing at the time. Yeah. I'm gonna hand I'm usually the one that kicks it off this time.
All right.
I did the Jungle Cruise last time first. It's Kelly's turn to start off.
All right. So here's what I think, and I think very much in light of, so for the obvious first plus up they're doing. They're electrifying the cars.
They kind of beat us to it.
Yeah, that was the easy one. So you know about me, and I know about you the exact same thing, that we have strong feelings about Tomorrowland.
Oh, yes. And for those who are listening, trust us, when we finally get to Tomorrowland, it's probably going to be 6 hours long.
It's going to take a while.
It's going to be a long episode. So anyway.
So I think I would like to see a Tomorrowland that leaned back into Walt's sort of mid-century ideas of transportation and actual progress. What I would love to see the Autopia become is a sort of exit from the city into the countryside. So when you leave Tomorrowland, like you come through some sort of chamber or pod or something that says you are exiting the city. Here is your electrified car to move into your leisure side in the countryside. So now suddenly you get this car that is issued to every citizen who wants to walk out of the city. And it takes you around tracks, and there can be show scenes that talk about the renewable energies that power your car. You can see solar energy plants. You can see some fusion experiments. You can see some hydrogen plants. Maybe there's even some tunnels with some show scenes in it. And then you come back around and you finish your drive and you enter back into the city of tomorrow after experiencing nature in your car. That's my plus up, is make it a real themed experience that actually describes, hey, we have this city with all this cool public transportation and the kind of progress we had actually hoped for in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
And here, if you want to go outside of it, here's a renewable way to do that.
That's awesome. I love that notion. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
And what's really weird is it's very similar to my plus up.
Not like that's ever happened before.
No, I mean, but I think that I'm going to predicate my version of that with saying that Autopia and this change of Autopia presents the park with a unique opportunity to actually plus up Tomorrowland like nobody's business. Make this the inaugural ride that takes you into the 21st century and beyond by bringing back probably one of the most important aspects of Tomorrowland. And again, we'll talk about this more in our Tomorrowland episode coming up. But the element is not technology. It is not aerials. It is not fins. It is not chrome. It's hope.
Yeah.
Because that is something that I think we need more of for tomorrow. And because we live in a nation that is so obsessed with the automobile, and we've built our whole society around it.
Yeah.
I commute 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
Not because I like it, but because I have to. Because that's just the way the economics are built around it.
Right.
And being able to show people something hopeful again.
Yeah.
That we can take something that has kind of taken and eaten our lives and get control of it again.
Yeah.
In a way that is beneficial to our souls, our environment, and our lives would be very beneficial. And I think it'd be actually kind of funny to set it up as a little bit like the Carousel of Progress. And take a little bit of the Carousel Progress and also take a little bit of the virtues that Epcot was originally trying to go for in the 80s when it first opened.
Yeah.
In which here is the possibility of the future. We've got the technology. We've got the know-how. All you have to do is this one little thing. All you got to do is this one little thing.
Yeah.
And I agree. Getting onto a car, have it be a smart car.
Yeah.
And what better way to have a smart car than to actually have that little professor from the world beneath us be the avatar for the artificial intelligence on board your smart car.
Oh, God, that's so great.
So there he is like, okay, everybody, we're going to take you to the future. And we're going to show you how life can actually be totally perfect for you.
So he's basically J. Audubon Woodlore.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And you're driving, and as you say, you're in the city of the future. Use the Autopia and People Mover soundtrack again if you want to.
Yeah.
And then leave. And like you say, go into the countryside. And you're not just driving through pastoral scenes, you're also driving through what every day is like.
Yeah.
When the car is once again just a tool and not a piece of our society that is killing us, but is actually something that is beneficial to us again.
Right.
And also, I think this is a marvelous opportunity for Disney, who is very, very hell-bent right now on theme park innovation and construction. That's where they make a lot of their money these days, not so much animation and IP development, though that's part of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of their money comes from theme parks. And there was a time in which Walt was very much on working with other companies like Monsanto to promote these new technologies.
Miracles
from molecules. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Being able to take these companies that are junior companies, these little teeny weeny companies that are trying to make the world a better place and giving the opportunity to showcase it by saying, we will take, you might not be able to get cities to do this. We'll take it. We'll do it.
Yeah.
And make these companies, shoot through the roof, or it would be a way to prove, nope, that didn't work. Become a testing ground again. Make Tomorrowland a place that is kind of like the Brad Bird movie, in which Tomorrowland is actually a testing ground for a hopeful tomorrow. Not just, we're going to give you a promise, we're actually testing it here.
Or like the dream that Epcot was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like because it's a smaller landscape. Tomorrowland in Anaheim is much smaller.
Yeah.
And it's basically taking innovations out of the big carousel and putting it out into the rest of the park. And the perfect place to start is with Autopia, especially if you're going to go all electric, and work with companies like Solar Roadways.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, look it up, solarroadways.com. It is a company that develops these hexagon tiles that that are meant to be put into the roadways, and they are solar cells that connect together like Legos, and you can build entire roadways with them. And they have LED lights implanted in them, so if you want to have an emergency roadway, they'll all turn red to tell you don't drive here. And you could put lettering, and you can have it reactive to temperature, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So suddenly, you can actually see the entire roadway of Autopia, or at least the sides of it, done in this fashion.
Yeah.
In which, yes, you leave the flashiness of the future, but just say, yes, the future is flashy, but the future is all made up of real people who want to go through everyday lives, and they're going to be great. And here's how they can be great with renewable energy and electric cars, and not just electric cars owned by rich people.
Yeah.
Electric cars that are actually sustainable, that actually will work, that the batteries aren't going to be an issue anymore, and we're testing them here.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, this whole ride is actually powered by the road you're driving on.
Yeah.
And on your way back, you get these light shows, especially like it should be an attraction you want to ride at night because it's a light show.
Yeah.
And it would be so cool.
It absolutely, it becomes the thing that Tomorrowland was supposed to be.
Yes.
It becomes this demonstration of technology that puts it in your hands. Like
right.
You are part of the demonstration.
You get a little taste that you can actually do this. And you're supposed to walk out of there going, I actually did that.
Yeah.
That felt great.
Yeah.
Like that's the way I felt when I first went to Tomorrowland as a kid.
Yeah.
And yes, it was Monsanto's Journey to Inner Space and Journey to Mars.
Yeah.
But you still walked out of there going, I could do that. That's cool. It was inspirational. Just to make something a little inspirational with something as mundane as a drive through the country, I think would be fantastic as a plus up.
I'm totally there with you. I think it's such a great idea.
So Disney Imagineering, solarroadways.com. Go check them out.
Yeah.
Another plug.
Put it together.
And by the way, we are not affiliated with Solar Roadways. I just think what they're developing is cool. So that's a freebie for you guys.
Yeah.
So
and go out there and find your own cool stuff too, and think dream about what that would be like if you got to test it at Disneyland.
Absolutely. I mean, if Imagineering is interesting these days because they really are about innovation.
Yeah.
With the robotics and also the traveling pathways that they're working on.
Oh, yeah.
The hollow floor, whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It's great, but start working with the little guy. And you never know who you're going to wind up with. Like, wouldn't it be great? You're supporting a little guy who really does change the future.
Yeah.
And it becomes, Disney helped us through this.
Yeah.
That's quite a thing to tout, especially when you have other things that you don't want people to be talking about.
Right.
But that's another story.
Yeah.
But giving people hope through Autopia, because Autopia is fun, it's goofy, it's great. But if you can have them walking off of that thing, not going, that was a good go-kart.
Yeah.
And actually get off of that thing thinking, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want to do that again. And this time I want to pay attention to what's on the left side of the car.
Right.
Because that was so cool.
Yeah.
And you have the little professor guy on a screen on your car going, okay, kids, now let's go look at this. And so that way it harkens back to like you said, retrofuturism.
Yeah.
And yet basing it off, taking retrofuturism and then building it off of what we currently have, I think would be a remarkable opportunity for Disney.
Yeah, cynical dystopian futurism is too easy. Hopeful futurism is where it's at.
And it's very difficult. I am well aware of that.
Sure.
I remember having a conversation again with Tony Baxter of Imagineering. And we talked very briefly in our conversation about how Tomorrowland is so difficult. And everybody who works at Disney, especially in Imagineering, everybody has a theory.
Yeah.
But they all say the same thing in the end, which is the one problem with Tomorrowland now is that there's no hope. It's such a mishmash of a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
If you stop, you can't call it Hope Land.
Yeah.
But making tomorrow hope, I think, is the big key here. Yeah. And I think Autopia actually presents them a very unique opportunity to actually play with that and go, we tried it here. We learned from our mistakes. We fixed it up a little bit. Now we're going to take it to the submarines. Now we're going to take it over here. Now we're going to take it over there and start spreading. So it becomes this ray of hope, oddly enough, from a car ride to spread out with the rest of the land.
Yeah. That sounds like a good place to stop to me.
I think so, too. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hey, check us all out on Window to the Magic on July 1st.
Yes.
And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Yep. I'm Peter Overstreet.
I'm Kelly McCubbin.
And you've been listening to
The Lowdown on the Plus Up. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up. If you have, please tell your friends where you found us. And if you haven't, we can pretend this never happened and need not speak of it again. For a lot more thoughts on theme parks and related stuff, check out my writing for Boardwalk Times at boardwalktimes.net. Feel free to reach out to Pete and I on our Lowdown on the Plus Up Facebook group, or send us a message directly at comments@lowdown-plus-up.com. We really want to hear about how you'd plus these attractions up and read some of your ideas on the show. Our theme music is Goblin, Tinker, Soldier, Spy by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. We'll have a new episode out real soon. Why? Because we like you.
Attention Autopia drivers. You are approaching the unload area. Prepare to stop. To stop, take your foot off the pedal. Do not bump the car ahead. Once you have reached the unload area, please remain seated until the car behind you has parked.